Why journals? Do you journal? And what way do you journal? Those are the questions, or some variation of those, that I ask you and I consider together today in our Divine Destiny study of Come Follow Me. Why do I ask that? Well, my friends, because the Lord commanded, at least in the 85th section of the Doctrine and Covenants, He commands the church to keep records. And why would He do that? Well, my friends, anything worth doing is worth remembering. And our memories are not as good as the written word. There are things that happen in your life that you say to yourself, I will never forget that. And some might be that way. But oftentimes, my friends, the details slip by us. And why is it important? Well, my friends, think of things that have happened in your life that you would like to share with others. And everyone has a life like that. People that came before you. Maybe your very personality traits you share with someone in your family that you never met. And eventually on back to, I believe, every good trait that is possessed by every person in this world can be traced back, not just through their own genealogy, but to our heavenly parents. They gave you traits, and they did not give you traits that they did not possess. So there's value, my friends, in learning who you are. And that really, at least in my opinion, is what the value of journaling can do for you and I. Now, there's lots of ways that we can journal, my friends. You can do it by written word. In today's world, you can do it through video. You can do it through audio. There's so very many ways. I would encourage you to maybe use a combination of all of them. You think more about it as people leave. I would give a lot, and I value probably more than anything hearing my own dad's voice, hearing stories in his words. I love reading some of the things that he has written. He's been gone now for 3-4 years. I still have on my phone the last message that he sent me. I will occasionally play that message just to hear his voice. Why is that important? My friends, you want to stay grounded in who you are, where you came from. And no, my dad was not a perfect man. None of us are. He had good traits, he had bad traits, just like I do, just like you do. But my friends, we can learn from the good traits. And those good traits are worth remembering. They're worth passing on. I'm talking to us individually. The Lord's talking to the church, and then, of course, us individually. So let's cover, I guess, both sides. Wilford Woodruff was a gentleman who was tasked with writing church history, remembering church history. I heard him say on one occasion, I did not hear him say, I read where he said, any time that I was in a meeting, I'm going to give you his quotes word for word, but this was another place in his journals where I read him say that I could not sleep. I could not sleep until I had written it down. In this particular quote, let me give you a quote that they share in Come Follow Me today. He says, I have been inspired and moved upon to keep a journal and write the affairs of this church as far as I can. I did not understand why my feelings were exercised so much in the early age of this church, but I understand it more now. I seldom ever heard Brother Joseph or the 12 preach or teach any principle but what I felt uneasy, as a fish out of water, until I had written it down. Then I felt right. I could write a sermon of Joseph's a week after it was delivered, almost word for word. And after it was written, it was taken from me or from my mind. This was a gift from God unto me. That's powerful, my friends. Think of the things that you have learned in your life, and most of them come from people who have come before you and I. Written words. What if they'd never been written? My goodness, most of the things that I hold valuable and dear have come from something that happened long before I was ever born. I assume the same is true of you. Most importantly, the most transcendent event in all of history, the life and the ministry, the crucifixion, the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, his own words while in mortality, his words both before his mortality and after his mortality to his prophets, to his children. What if they had never been written down or shared with you and I? You begin to see where I'm going? My friends, that's just what it does for other people. When you and I write things down, it changes who we are because it changes what we focus on. It changes what we become grateful for. There are thousands of stories I could share with you. I simply want to share with you one that I read of one of my own ancestors. I may have shared this with you before, but probably not in this detail. It's by a gentleman by the name of George Brinkerhoff. He was a colonel in the Revolutionary War, but he had also been long enough involved that he was retired and he was about 70 years old. But he knew a gentleman that was about 40 years old. You will recognize this name because his name was George Washington. George Washington, and I did not know this the first time I read this. It wasn't until I read several places later that I began to understand who George Washington was to this great-grandfather Brinkerhoff of mine. They were cousins. They were first cousins. Earlier in my reading, I found that he used to stop and stay with my grandpa Brinkerhoff. I won't keep going through the greats so you understand. But he would stay with him, and they were something of a mentor and a mentee, my grandpa being one of his mentors, according to George Washington. But they were very good friends. And of course, you know who George Washington was. He was our founding father. But he used to, in his travels, stay in my grandfather's home. They had a home for him. A room for him in their home. And he would sleep there quite often. The reading I said it was a room behind their mantle of their fireplace. But there's a funny part that I enjoy, that I start to learn some of the humor of both my grandfather and also George Washington that I really appreciate. But what I appreciate the most, my friends, is these things took place pre-Revolutionary War. These were in the mid-1700s, leading up to the Civil War, and then, not the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and then during the Revolutionary War, when he would stay with them, the parts that really hit home to me, that helped me understand who these men were. There's always some people that want to talk to you about what our founding fathers are or what they weren't. I have, in first-hand writing, in my own family, from my own grandfathers, these words: George Washington, as he would stay with our family, we would read from the Bible together as a family and pray every night. George Washington, you know that you know this because you've heard it, but the world wants you to believe differently. He was a very God-fearing man. I appreciate knowing that from my own ancestry. A funny one was the time as my grandfather retired, he still wanted to know some of the things that were going on. And so as George Washington would come and they would stay, they would talk, and he would try and get George Washington to share with him some of what's going on. He wanted to be in the know. And George would tell him, I can't tell you those things, you know that. And finally, I think my grandfather thought he had kind of worn down George Washington, and George finally said to him, "Can you keep a secret?" And my grandfather said, "Yes, I can." And George Washington, with a smile on his face, said, "So can I." And he never told him. Oh, my friends, the things that you and I can learn about what life is about can happen in these journaling activities as history comes forward. And of course, as I have said, the most important and transcendent is everything that you and I can learn about the Lord Jesus Christ, who he is, what he was. Joseph Smith said on one occasion, the fundamental principle of, he said Mormonism at the time, but I guess we don't use that word, but he said the fundamental principle of Mormonism are the testimonies of the apostles and prophets concerning Jesus Christ, that he lived, that he died, that he rose again the third day and ascended into heaven. And all other things which pertain to our religion are only appendages to it. In other words, my friends, events, the most important event that ever happened, Jesus Christ and his life. We learn from others. And most importantly, we learn from the Spirit, as the Spirit confirms truth to you and I about the things that we read, about the things that we hear, about the things that we feel. Let me share with you some final words from President Wilford Woodruff when he said, while walking in a rapid stream, he talks about why journaling is important. He says, while walking in a rapid stream, we cannot tread twice in the same water. Neither can we spend time the same twice. When we pass out of that door, the work of this meeting will be closed to us forever. We shall never spend time of this evening again. Then should we not keep a record of our work, our teachings, and our counsel which we give in this meeting? We should. My friends, can I invite you and I, wherever we are in life, you may be super good at this. This might be something that you struggle with. Both are okay. Anything that you choose to do from today forward can be an improvement. Let us seek to improve, my friends. Begin to write down your thoughts and feelings. There will be those that come after you that you may not be thinking about now. It will improve your life when you write them down and you think about them. It will improve their life when they have an opportunity to read. And might I share with you, the most valuable thing that you will share through your experiences is how you view this most transcendent of all activities, of the most important man who ever walked the earth, the Lord Jesus Christ, who did live, who does know you, who does lead you and I through a prophet here upon the earth, but also in a very personal way because of what he did in that garden. In a very personal way as he shares his Spirit with you when you ask, both he and his Father. My friends, can I invite you and I, write some things down, share some things that your posterity will be able to look back and know that what your life did most was point to the life of the Master. And in so doing will help them have a desire to come unto the Master, to follow him, and use their life to point to the Master, so that all of us together, my friends, can reach our divine destiny. Have a wonderful day.